Why are they killing the sheep? Why? What are we celebrating? What's going on? Why are these people praying in the street? What's this voice? What's these sounds that I'm hearing? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome everybody to My First Ramadan. Today I have the honor, the pleasure of inviting a gentleman I truly deeply respect, a historian, a teacher, Ustadh Mustafa Briggs. In our scholarly world, we have many qualified voices who offer new perspectives on Islam. But Ustadh Mustafa Briggs has ventured into areas that many people have never even thought about. His groundbreaking work, Beyond Bilal, explores deep and often overlooked connections between Black history and Islam. Through his research and storytelling, he brings life to key historical narratives that continue to inspire the Ummah today. Embracing Islam at the young, tender age of 13, Ustadh Mustafa Briggs has grown into a role model for many like myself. Ustadh, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you today. Welcome to My First Ramadan.
Bismillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, it's a pleasure to be here today in this interesting, inshallah, going to be an interesting program. I always talk about things that hardly anybody ever thinks of, but at the same time as well, you guys are going to ask me questions, and even the concept of this show is something that I've never really spoken about before. Alhamdulillah, it all comes together nicely.
Inshallah. We try our best and we leave the rest to God, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So, Sheikh, what are you up to today? What's your latest area of research? I know you've just launched the book. Let's kick off with that.
So, alhamdulillah, right now, I'm taking a break in between. I was touring before, and then now Ramadan is coming up. So I just took some time to be with my family, to be with my son and everything. But as you mentioned, just 2 weeks ago, I was able to launch my, technically my third book, but I'll call it my second book, which is Islam and the Making of the Modern World. And so this new book, before I was previously known for my 2-volume book, Beyond Bilal, Black History in Islam, which I have now consolidated into 1 volume. So it's just 1 book now. And that dealt with Black history in Islam from the time of the Sahaba all the way to the present day, and even before the Prophet ﷺ, in some of the biblical figures that we share in the Quran with the Judeo-Christian tradition, and exploring, their blackness and all of those kind of things. And then now, alhamdulillah, I've moved on from that and I'm discussing general Islamic history. And so this new book, Islam and the Making of the Modern World, has, it touches on, it's about 7 or 8 chapters, and it touches on different periods in Islamic history that I feel a lot of people are unaware of, but are essential for us in understanding our role in the present day, and us as Muslims, our space in the world that we live in now. So the first chapter, for example, talks about the relationship between the Roman Empire and the Islamic world, and an interesting way of re-looking at history, because we've been taught traditionally through Western education that there was the fall of Rome, and then there was the Byzantine Roman Empire, and then that was defeated by the Ottomans. But if we look at history from an alternate perspective, because history is just about who tells the story rather than the actual historical facts, if we reanalyze the historical facts, we realize that the Roman Empire, the capital of the Roman Empire, was moved from Rome to Constantinople. And so therefore the Byzantine Empire, which people like to talk about, was actually just the continuation of the Roman Empire. And they never referred to themselves as Byzantines, they referred to themselves as Romans. And for us as Muslims, we should be referring to them as Romans, because that's what the Quran refers to them as, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ referred to them as. And so if we look at Islamic history, the Prophet ﷺ's last ever military expedition was against the Roman Empire. The first battle that took place which was the battle that was led by Osama bin Zaid, was against the Roman Empire. And then the territories of the Roman Empire kept on falling to the Khilafah, Egypt being one of them, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, etc., being all parts of the Roman Empire, until the defeat of the Eastern Roman Empire by Muhammad al-Fatih. But what's interesting is that when Muhammad al-Fatih took over the Roman Empire, he didn't demolish it, but he took on the title Kaisar-i-Rum, Caesar of Rome. So the Ottomans saw themselves as a continuation of the Roman Empire. And so if we analyze history from an alternative perspective, we can see that the Roman Empire never ended. It just transitioned into the Ottoman Empire, which was a Khilafah, which was an Islamic state. And so, just different aspects of history like that, I look at and I explore and I just tell the narratives from alternative ways of seeing it, and hopefully it should be interesting.
Inshallah. I have pre-ordered the book sometime soon, but it's too fresh for us to even be able to have a deeper discussion between us. Inshallah, we can have a separate session where we discuss deeper the content of the book. But Sheikh, what makes it so beautiful, even when I was reading your Beyond Bilal series, is that you have a way of inspiring the ummah of today. How? By mentioning the high points, the highlights, the golden ages, the people we should look up to, the notable people. And there's so many people who have been lost in history and their efforts just gone in the wind. And you bring it up again. And for the state of the ummah today, we need people like you to remind us of what the people of the past have done, to take reference from them, to be inspired by them, to push our ummah forward. And for this service, Sheikh, I genuinely thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. Alhamdulillah.
All right, Sheikh, let's get back on track to our topic today, My First Ramadan. I know you were born in London. You grew up in London. I do not know if you'll be too comfortable revealing your age, but growing up in London, how did your early environment shape you?
So I would say growing up in London was interesting because London is a multicultural and a multi-ethnic city. So even if you look at the demographics of London and you look at the different kind of people that live there, especially the area that I grew up in an area called Camden, which had a large mixed population. So I remember going to school and everyone in my school was from somewhere else. There were hardly ever any English kids in my school. Rather, everyone was from, Bangladesh. There were some people from Pakistan, some people from Kosovo, from Albania, Nigeria, Ghana. And so we all grew up with this knowledge and this understanding that, yes, we're all in London and we're all from the UK, but we all have origins in different places. And the way that the educational curriculum worked as well was that we were taught to understand and know everybody else's cultures and identities and religions. So I remember, for example, in primary school, we had to learn about, as I grew up in a Christian family, so I knew about Christianity. But then part of our curriculum in school was learning about Islam, because on Eid and in Ramadan, we'd see the Muslims celebrating. We had to learn about Sikhism. We had to learn about Buddhism. We had to learn about Judaism. We had to learn about Hinduism, because we had Hindus in our class as well. And so even though I went to a church school, the church school's curriculum was based on trying to help us understand everybody's culture and identity, and also to stop things like bullying and to stop things like racism within the school. And so growing up in that environment, it's always curious because you think about, so for me, I remember I used to think deep and ask deep questions. And I always used to wonder, like, okay, well, I'm African and I'm Christian. Why is this person Asian and Hindu? Or why is this person Albanian and Muslim? And so that's what kind of got me interested in history, because it's only through understanding history that you come to understand those kind of things. How did, this white person, for example, I remember I had an Albanian friend who was Muslim and would say, yeah, I'm Muslim. I'm like, okay, but you're white and you're Albanians in Europe. How did you end up being Muslim? I thought Islam was a religion for et cetera, et cetera. So, you just grow up in that environment. And so we all it was a melting pot. And that then exposes you to different ideas, exposes you to different things. you start to question, you start to explore, you start to realize, okay, well, why are things the way they are? If you just don't take things for granted. And I didn't. So yeah, that's how I ended up.
Sheikh, so how old were you when you started to think deeper about the identities that are attached to individuals through race, religion, and ethnicity?
I think as far as maybe 6 or 7, because my earliest memories really of like actually thinking about these kind of things was around 6. I remember when I was 6 years old, my family took me to the Gambia. So my grandmother's Gambian, and that's where my mother grew up. She was born in England, but then when she was around 6 or 7, when the Gambia got independence, she moved back to the Gambia because her mother got a job in the new government as the secretary of the president of the Gambia. So my mom grew up in Gambia until GCSEs, and then she came back to England for her GCSEs. So Gambia has always been home for us. And so I remember when I was around 6 years old, I went back to the Gambia. And, I grew up in a family that was Christian, but as with most places in West Africa, families are always mixed. So even though my part of the family was Christian, my grandma had Muslim cousins. I had Muslim cousins. And I remember going to my grandmother's best friend's house for Eid. And so we celebrated Eid there in the Gambia. I was around 6 years old. And I was just like, why are they killing the sheep? What are we celebrating? What's going on? Why are these people praying in the street? What's this voice? What's these sounds that I'm hearing? Your Quran and all these different things. And I would just ask questions. And through there, I came to kind of have a deeper understanding of like, okay, Islam is a part of the fabric of where I come from. And 90% of my country, the Gambia, is Muslim. And so that kind of led me into researching more things. And then also as well, on that trip, I was taken to a tour. There was a tour that was called the Roots Tour. So there's a story called Roots by Alex Haley, which is about a Gambian man that was captured and sold into slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. So when I was around 6, I had to kind of watch the movie, and then I went on the tour. And I was told about the history of the transatlantic slave trade and colonization, which is a very young age to learn all of those things. But nevertheless, that's what my family were involved in. And so that brought me, when I came back to England, I had all of these things in my mind. And it kind of just set off the trajectory from there.
To have that maturity at that young age has given you a gift, Sheikh. And
yeah. It's about, I think it's about what you're exposed to and what you're taught. So because I was told about those things and exposed to those things and made to think about those things, it kind of informed my reality, because the way that my grandmother and my mother told me about these things was that this is your history, this is your culture, this is what makes you who you are. So you need to know this and understand this, especially if you're living in a country that's not your own country. You kind of have to know yourself and understand why you're here and what brought you here and how you ended up here and what you're supposed to do whilst you're there. My family was very conscious of educating me in that aspect of things. And so, alhamdulillah.
We know Camden to be an area where art is celebrated, culture is celebrated. Yeah. As you mentioned, it's a cultural melting pot where people from all around the world come together. Mm-hmm. But London in itself is a cultural melting point. In your personal circle, amongst your friends, were you close to any Muslims?
Yeah, of course. My school, I think, was about 50% Muslim. So if you didn't have a Muslim friend, it was weird. My primary school was majority Bengalis. There was a lot of Somalis. There were a lot of people from Muslim backgrounds there. So we grew up experiencing and knowing about Islam. And then when I transitioned into secondary school, it was the same thing. There was even before I even became Muslim, there was a prayer room in the school where the Muslim students at lunchtime would go to pray Dhuhr and stuff. And my friends would take me there. I'd hang out there. I'd ask them questions. They'd give me books and stuff. So I'd always had Muslim friends and Muslim influences around. And then, as I mentioned as well, my mother's side of the family, I have a lot of Muslim cousins. I had a lot of Muslim relatives. I grew up, being exposed to Islam. So Islam was never anything new. And at a young age, I had kind of already made a decision that when I grew up, I wanted to become Muslim. So even before I took Shahada, I had memorized the Fatiha. I had internally just made the decision to say, I'm going to be Muslim when I'm older. It makes more sense to me than being Christian. So from around 10, 11, I was like, I mentally, I was Muslim. and I would consider myself Muslim, but I formally took Shahada at the age of 13. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. Ustad, bring me back to that night, the night before you became Muslim, as that 13-year-old young teenager.
Yeah. It was it was interesting. So what had been happening was I mentioned I had gone to the Gambia at the age of 6. I had gone back again at the age of around 11, and I spent the entire summer holidays there. So I spent about 6 weeks there. And it was during that time that I kind of went deeper into researching about Islam and being exposed to Muslim communities, etc. And so there was a sheikh that I had heard of then called Sheikh Ibrahim Nias. And then, I've got his tafsir there, so that's his picture. So Sheikh Ibrahim Nias, his family, his grandson Sheikh Hassan Sise was somebody that worked with the African American Muslim community. He had an email address. You could send him emails, he'd respond. So around the age of 12, I just used to email him and he would always respond to me. And he gave me his number. I would call him, I would talk to him. And he was just basically the person that was guiding me through my journey to Islam. And so one day, he had messaged me, he had sent me an email and he had said, my younger brother, Sheikh Mahi Sise, he's coming to the UK. I want you to go to visit him and I'm praying that you become Muslim. And so in my head, I was like, okay, well, I want to become Muslim, but not right now. I want to wait till I'm older and I'm more independent to become Muslim. But I do want to see the Sheikh, so I'll go and see the Sheikh. And so what ended up happening was I took the address of where the Sheikh was staying. I contacted the people that were hosting him because Sheikh Hassan Sise had given me their number. And I just called them the night before and I said, I want to come and see the Sheikh. And so they said, okay, tomorrow, if you come, we'll meet you at such and such a train station and then we'll take you to see the Sheikh. So that's literally how it happened. I just jumped on the train. I told my mom I'm going out. My mom was like, okay, see you later. And the night before, I hadn't made the decision to become Muslim. I just wanted to see the Sheikh. So it wasn't like a decision that I had made to say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to take Shahada. It was just, okay, I'm going to meet this Muslim person. I get to ask them questions. They have knowledge, etc. And so I, the next day, jumped on the train, got picked up from the station, got driven to the house. And then I started to have a conversation with the Sheikh. And the Sheikh was just giving me dawah. He was saying, you should become Muslim. My brother told me you're interested in Islam. You should just take your Shahada. And I was thinking, I want to take it, but not now. And then he said, well, what if you don't live till the point where you wanted to take it? And I was like, okay, that's true. And I said, but it's going to be difficult with my family. He said, yeah, but even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you study his life, in the beginning of his mission, it was difficult with his family. And then Allah made it easy and gave him Medina. And so same thing would happen to you. It might be difficult in the beginning, but it would be easier in the end if you have patience and you practice, etc. So I was just going back and forth with the Sheikh, back and forth. And then in the end, I just decided, okay, Bismillah, I'll become Muslim. I'll take the Shahada. So that's when I took the Shahada. That's when he gave me the name Muhammad al-Mustafa. And then, I've been with them since. So his niece was the one that taught me the Quran. His niece and his nephew, they lived in England at the time. And I continued to study and continued to frequent them until it is what it is today.
I want to latch on to one very important point that you brought up, family. I think a lot of people who are interested in Islam, I've met many individuals who are very interested in Islam, but the only thing that's holding them back is the family. Or the only thing that's holding them back from announcing their faith publicly is their family. How did your family react to this breaking news that you are now called Mustafa Briggs?
So for the first year or two, I didn't tell my family that I took Shahada. I just kind of hid it. But then they started to notice I didn't eat pork anymore. And they started to notice that. And then one day my family caught me praying in my room. And that's when they realized, oh, okay, he's actually Muslim. But in the beginning, they just thought it was a phase. They were just like, oh, yeah, he's just doing this and maybe he'll stop doing it in a couple of years or whatever, or a couple of months. So they didn't really take it too seriously. But then as time goes on, they started to see that I was more and more serious. It did cause some discussions, it caused some arguments, but then in the end, one of my aunts was just like, as long as he's not doing anything dangerous, then just let him do what he wants to do. It's just a positive decision. And now, alhamdulillah, they all support me in it, and they're all really cool with me being Muslim, so it's not an issue. But before, in the beginning, it was a bit difficult, but it wasn't too difficult. I've heard worse stories. I've heard stories of people being kicked out of their homes, people being, their families not talking to them anymore, and all of those kind of things. But for me, it was never that. For me, from the very beginning, my family, they weren't too bad. They didn't take it too badly. Yeah.
Sheikh, as a young Muslim, no one at home knew that as a young boy, as a young Muslim, no one knew that you were Muslim. What support systems did you have? I know you had the contact to your sheikh, but your immediate support system.
I would say the support systems that I had were my friends. It was literally my Muslim friends were the ones and that's what transformed. And even like my first Ramadan, it was that when I took Shahada, as I mentioned, in school, there was the prayer room. And then as well, outside of school, I had other friends who were Muslim that when I told them, I took Shahada and I'm Muslim, they were so happy for me and they were so welcoming that they took me in and they would try and teach me things and take me to places, take me to events, take me to talks. I would hang out at their houses and they were the support system for me. It was my Muslim friends that were my support system generally.
I think you knew what Ramadan was before you became Muslim because of your exposure, your social circle, your school. But how was your first Ramadan? Do you remember your first day fasting or your first day practicing Ramadan?
Yes, my first Ramadan that I remember, because I don't remember the Ramadan, I don't think, when I took Shahada, or I think I took Shahada in Ramadan or something. Maybe my first Ramadan was a bit off, but the first Ramadan I remember I was around 14 and I had a really, really good friend. I had two really good friends and they were cousins. So one was called Amini Munye and the other one was called Omar Sufi. And they were the ones that just kind of adopted me that Ramadan, and I would eat iftar at their house every day. So they told their parents, we have a friend, he's black, and and he took Shahada. They're Somali, but they're from like a minority ethnic group in Somalia called Barawa. So they're like mixed Yemeni and Portuguese and Arab, and they have all these different mixes. But they told their parents, so Amini's mum and Omar Sufi's dad, I think were brother and sister or something like that. But they told both of their parents in both their houses. And so every day I would alternate between eating iftar at one person's house or eating iftar at the other person's house. And it was a fun Ramadan, honestly. I got to experience Somali food, Baranese food, and just see what a Muslim family vibe was. And that was the most interesting thing for me, because I would go to the house and it was like, all of the cousins would be there, all the uncles and aunties would be there. Everyone would kind of be eating together. So if it was iftar now, we'd all have our dates, our samosas, our shurba, which is like the kind of soup and stuff. And then after we eat, then we'll pray Maghrib together and then we'll chill, we'll get ready to go to Taraweeh. We would go to Regent's Park Mosque to pray Taraweeh. And I remember we would do this. So, Taraweeh they'd pray 20 rakahs. So we'd go in with Omar Sufi's dad. That's what we'd do. We'll pray the first 2 rakahs. Maybe if we tried, we'll do 4 rakahs. And then we'll go out for the next 16 rakahs. We'll just be outside talking, playing games, just chilling, whatever. And then we'll come back at the end and pray the witr. And then we'll go home. They go home to their house. I'll go home to my house. But they really kind of took me in, and they really, I really appreciate them. That I think more than they even realize. For my first, Ramadan, that was my experience. And then the days that I didn't go to their house, I knew that they would have free iftars at the masjid. So sometimes even that Ramadan and after that Ramadan, I would go to different places, different masjids and do iftar there. But even if I'm by myself, you could end up going, they'll give you rice, they'll give you chicken. Those days they used to give out 4 meals. Now, I don't know with the economy, if they're still doing it or not. But back in those days, we used to get a little iftar box.
Yeah.
And so you could go to the masjid around Maghrib, break your fast, pray Maghrib, chill, wait until Isha, pray Taraweeh and go home. And so, my early days as well. There was another family called the Fatuga family. And the father of the family was my RE teacher, my religious studies teacher. And then the son was my friend in school. And they also took me and I used to go to their house as well. So it was very much like me even though I didn't have my own family as Muslims, other Muslim families, in seeing that I was young and I was a new Muslim, they would reach out and take me in. And they would make me feel like I was a part of their family. And I feel like that's something very important for all of us as Muslims now to think about, that there's always going to be people within our communities who might not have the same families as us, same structures as us, same support system as us. So what can we do to be a support system to them? Because if it wasn't for, the Fatuga family and the Sufi family and the Munye family, I might not be who I am today. I might not be the person that I am, because they were my early support system when I entered Islam, especially my first Ramadan. And the first Ramadan is always kind of transformative because there's so much focus on prayer and reflection and study and Quran and connecting with your faith more so than any other time of the year. That's when you really get to solidify your identity as a Muslim. That's when you really begin to understand what the reality of Islam is, not only in the ritualistic aspects of the prayer and the fasting, but in the practical and social aspects of the brotherhood, of the family. Like, which other society will see somebody that they don't know, they're not related to, they have no personal interest in, but take them into their home, allow them to be with their children and be a part of the family. Is all kind of from the teachings of Islam and from the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they were able to do that.
Ustad, you cover so many points in your story and in that portion alone. The importance of a community, the importance of a family unit is of paramount importance. Unfortunately, today we see these values becoming very isolated.
Mhm.
People are more focused on isolating themselves. Families that live next door to each other, they don't even know the names of their neighbors today. It's a matter of fact. It's the realities of today.
And that's an aspect of the deen that a lot of people have forgotten about. Even the concept of the ummah. Ummah comes from the word which means mother, meaning that we all have that shared relationship as brothers and sisters from the same mother and the same father. That's what the ummah is supposed to actualize in us. And Allah tells us in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that the believers are only or nothing but brothers and sisters to each other. Innama is like it's a rhetorical device that you use to say all other options are not applicable in this situation, that the only thing that we can apply to the brothers and sisters, to the believers, is that they are brothers and sisters to each other. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first thing that he did when he arrived in Medina Munawwara, he arrived with a group of people from the Quraysh, from Mecca, and then he arrived to the Ansar, who were from a different tribe, the Aus tribe and the Khazraj tribe in Medina. And even though they were all Arab, they had completely different cultures, they had completely different backgrounds, they had completely different societal norms. The way people lived in Mecca was very different from how they lived in Yathrib. The way that the Quraysh did things was very different from how the Aus and the Khazraj did things. But he made sure that each one of the Ansar from Medina would host someone from the Muhajirin, and they became brothers. So he created this brotherhood between Al-Muhajirin and the Ansar, and that was the foundation of the society in Medina. And so the deen, the foundation of the deen, is this brotherhood. It should be this love that we're supposed to have for one another, and this kind of us seeing ourselves as family, even more so than those who we are related to. So we have the alaqat deen, and that should be stronger than alaqat teen, meaning like the relationship between us as practitioners of the deen should be more stronger than the relationship that we have with those people who we're related to physically. And so all of these aspects of Islam are things that we need to think about, especially in this day and age when there's so many conflicts between the Muslims, there's so many issues between Muslims. Bringing us all together under the banner of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is the most important thing.
Thank you, Sheikh. So, Sheikh, growing up in the UK, being an Islamic academic in the UK, compare the Islamic landscape of the UK today compared to when you were 13 or younger.
I would say it's a long time, but it's not a long time between now and then. Yeah, I would say, roughly 2 decades ago to now. I would say Islam is stronger in society now than it has ever been. And every year we start to see more and more presence of Islam and Muslims, and more things that cater to Islam and Muslims developing now than before. So, I mean, growing up, Islam was always present and Muslims were always present. But I feel like now there's more information, there's more knowledge, there's more events, there's more things happening, and there's just a greater presence of Islam. So I remember something recently, and I talk about this actually in my new book, Islam and the Making of the Modern World. The final chapter of the book, I talk about, growing up in London as a Muslim and how I've seen Islam kind of change. Not Islam change, but the Muslim
Yeah.
community change, develop over the years. And one of the most interesting things, for example, is I remember they started doing something in London called Eid in the Square. So Trafalgar Square, which is like one of the main iconic landmarks of London, there's a celebration of Eid there every year. And there's an Eid festival there every year. And then also as well, I remember growing up, we used to have the Christmas lights, and that was like a big thing for us. Anytime December comes, Oxford Street and Regent Street, they'll start doing Christmas lights. Now, just recently, about I think 2 years ago, they've started this thing called Ramadan lights. So the same streets that used to celebrate Christmas lights, when it's Ramadan, they put Ramadan lights up in those streets to signify the beginning of Ramadan. And so all of these different things is just showing that Islam has a greater presence in society. If we look at the statistics, London, for example, is 15% Muslim. So that means like 1 in 6 people maybe is Muslim in London. And then in certain areas, if you go to East London, Whitechapel, and those kind of areas, it goes all the way up to 36% in certain boroughs of London, in East London, Ilford, and all those kind of areas. So imagine you can go to an area in London where 1 in 3 people are Muslim. And so all of these things are kind of helping the development of Islam and the Muslim community there and the presence of Islam. Even the mayor of London now, Sadiq Khan, is Muslim. So all of these things, I think Islam has a much stronger presence now than it did when I was growing up. And people are more conscious and aware. Even just in popular culture, Islam has become such a mainstream part of popular culture. If you go to school in London, especially in inner city London, you're going to go to school with Muslims, you're going to adopt Muslim words in your vocabulary. We see so many non-Muslims, now saying wallahi, saying, different mashallah, alhamdulillah, all these different Muslim terms. And it's become part of mainstream culture, especially urban culture. The urban culture in London is heavily influenced by Islam. And there's so many things that people are conscious of and they're aware of when it comes to Islam and Muslims, that we can see that if it continues growing in the way that it is now, we're going to see like it's going to become the religion, definitely, and the culture that has the strongest presence in London, definitely.
Sheikh, in all this, what is the importance of speaking the local language?
I mean, there's two types of local language. So there's the local language in terms of English.
Yes,
and I feel like in England, everybody speaks English and everybody communicates in English. And I don't think most people in London are as fluent in their original ethnic languages as they are in English. So I know me, for example, I'm more fluent in English than any other language. And most of the people that I grew up with are the same. But then there's also as well the culture of the people and the local kind of colloquialisms that exist in London, being a part of that. And this is something that's even from the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ told us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather in the Quran says that he did not send any prophet illa bilisani qawmihi, except with the tongue of his people. And the scholars, when they translated this, they said it's not just about sharing the language with the people, but it's understanding the cultural context and the attitudes and the urf of the people that they're sent to. So the Prophet ﷺ in his time did the same, and all of the different prophets did the same in their time. And the ulama scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So every scholar that's a part of a community, you need to understand the community and you need to be able to speak to people in a language that they understand.
Ustadh, today, what does Ramadan mean to you today?
Today, honestly, Ramadan just means a time to unplug and a time to focus on my worship and reignite my relationship with the Quran and reignite my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Salah and through Taraweeh. So for me, Ramadan, there's three main things that I focus on when it comes to Ramadan. The first thing is re-establishing my relationship with the Quran. So I try and read a portion of Quran every day, either 2 hizbs, which is a juz, or more or less. Whenever it's Ramadan, I always try and increase whatever I'm reading, and I try and also listen to tafsirs of the Quran and go through tafsir and try and, make sure that I don't skip any days in terms of reading the Quran every day of Ramadan. I try and do at least one khatam of Quran in the month. If I'll do more, if I can do minimum, the lowest I'll go is one. And studying the Quran every day. That's the first thing. The second thing is as well, making sure that I'm praying all of my salah on time and I'm praying tarawih. So making sure that, I'm trying to pray all of my 5 prayers in the masjid or in Jama'ah at least. And then also making sure that I attend tarawih every day. And then the third thing that I always try and do is go on umrah. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, umrah in Ramadan is the same as hajj. And in another riwayah, the same as hajj with me. And that always kind of, now, alhamdulillah, Allah's made it easier for many of us to go on umrah through the new initiatives of the Saudi Arabian government, the fact that they've made tourist visas easier and they've made it easier for us to go. So it's upon us to take advantage of those opportunities. Yeah. And it's just about reestablishing and also spending time with my family. Alhamdulillah, now that I have a family that is Muslim, growing up, I never had a Muslim family to spend Ramadan with, but now I'm married and I have a son. So I have that kind of vibe at home. And that was something that I'd always dreamed of growing up, that, okay, wow, I can have iftar in my house. I can, invite people over for iftars, attend other people's iftars. All of these kind of things are really good. And I know a lot of people, some people even I've heard people say things like, oh, you people focus too much on iftars and socializing in Ramadan. But that's an act of worship as well. It's just as much an act of worship to visit fellow Muslims and spend time with them as it is to fast or as it is to pray. And the same way you get rewards for fasting and praying is the same way you get rewards for visiting your brothers and sisters in Islam for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's something that's very positive when it comes to Ramadan that we should all try and do. Feeding people, the Prophet ﷺ said the person who feeds a fasting person gets the same reward as them without taking anything away from their reward. So hosting iftars and doing all of those things, all of these things are amazing things that will help you and help increase you to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month. So for me, I like to kind of unplug in the month of Ramadan. Sometimes, unfortunately, I have to travel and do events and give lectures and conferences and fundraisers and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if it's me to me, I like to try and just focus on my ibadah, focus on trying to, get right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making sure that everything that I've been slacking on in the rest of the year, at least I try not to slack on in the month of Ramadan.
Sheikh, I want to touch on your travels, especially during Ramadan. I follow you on social media. You're never in England. You're always out of England. Always on the move. I think last year alone, you went to places like Bangladesh, Morocco, different parts of Africa. Can you share with me any notable Ramadan experiences or something that has taken you by surprise in terms of a very unique culture that people may not know about?
So before I moved to Egypt, I used to spend every Ramadan either in Morocco or Senegal. Those were the 2 places that I would like to go for Ramadan. And both of them are interesting. I think for me, Senegal was more interesting than anywhere else because in Senegal, Ramadan is taken extremely seriously, especially where I was in Senegal, which was a city called Kaolack. So in Ramadan, it was a packed schedule where after Dhuhr, we study Hadith. Then after Asr, we study Tafsir in an environment, the Islamic sciences. And so West Africa in general, what happens in Ramadan is that the scholars have sessions of Tafsir. So every day after Asr in the masjid, they'll be teaching tafsir and they'll be going through the Quran in the local language. And I feel like that's also something that's very important and very essential because if we're meant to connect with the Quran in the month of Ramadan, for many of us, we don't speak Arabic and we don't understand the Quran. Even if we read the translation, there's always deeper context and deeper things involved when it comes to the Quran, more so that you can get from reading the translations. And so in West Africa, the focus in Ramadan is always tafsir, going to tafsir, studying the Quran, understanding it in a deeper way and maintaining your relationship with it. For many people who've memorized it, they might not understand or know the meanings, and doing so in a way that contextualizes it and speaks to the Quran, speaking to you in your local language. That's the most important thing. And so the most significant aspect of Ramadan for me, especially in West Africa, is that. And I've experienced Ramadan in Senegal, I've experienced Ramadan in Nigeria, and in both places, that's the culture that every day after Asr, you're going to go to a tafsir. That's all people want to do. They want to go to tafsir. Their favorite sheikh will be giving tafsir of the Quran and explaining the surahs in the local language and enriching it with hadith, with stories, with anecdotes, with all of those different things. So that's something that I really felt was interesting when it comes to celebrating Ramadan elsewhere. And it's something that we should think about developing in our own communities as well. I know some people do it. So I have seen some tafsir sessions in English in England and in America. But I think the month of Ramadan should be used as a month for that specifically.
So, Sheikh, thank you so much for sharing with us your experiences in West Africa. Inshallah, we hope that one day we will be able to sit after Zohar till Isha in remembrance of Allah in some way or another. As this program is meant to be a program to inspire Muslims and non-Muslims, what advice would you have for someone who is experiencing Ramadan for the first time?
My most important piece of advice would be to don't overburden yourself. Take it easy. Even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Ramadan in the Quran, one of the things that He says is, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. That Allah wants ease for you and He doesn't want hardship for you. And so don't overburden yourself when it comes to Ramadan. And if it's your first Ramadan, don't feel as though you have to keep up with people who've been doing it for 10 and 20 years and have more experience than you. So, for example, fasting, as we know, is the obligation, and we should all try our best to fast in the way that we know how to fast. But when it comes to other things such as reading the Quran or doing Taraweeh, etc., don't feel pressured to pray 20 rakahs of Taraweeh. Allah can accept that, and Allah can use that as a reward. There's the recommended, which the Prophet ﷺ used to pray, and we know that he used to pray either 8 rakahs nafil and then 3 witr, or 10 rakahs nafil and 3 witr, which makes it either 11 rakahs or 13 rakahs, which is the practice in most places. Other people go all the way up to 21 or 23, etc., or 36 even in some areas. But even if you just pray 2 nafil, it's something. If it comes to the Quran, we know that the practice is to do a khatam, to do 1 juz every day until you finished all 30 juz, etc. But even if you just read 1 page a day, that's something. And the most important thing I would say is to try and find a community to spend Ramadan with. Try and find other Muslims that you can use the time to benefit from their company. Try and attend Islamic events. Try and, be a part of the wider ummah, because all of these acts of worship are congregational acts of worship. As much as the individual aspect of fasting, there's the congregational aspect of fasting. As much as there's the individual aspect of worshiping Allah, there's the congregational aspect, and Islam is built upon the two. So try and plug in with your local community, try and plug in with positive people in your area. Now we have the internet, so it's easier to see what's going on around us and what's going on in the areas that we could visit, and try and benefit from the programs and the different things available in our local masajid, in our local organizations. And even just online, you can find good YouTube series to watch. Omar Suleiman has one every year, different institutes, Roots, and all these different people have really, really positive content that they release in Ramadan. So all of those things as well, when you combine it, inshallah, it can make for a fruitful Ramadan. And obviously Cult Box as well has so many different programs and different things for you to explore. So all of those things are things we should take benefit from, inshallah.
Sheikh, finally, is there anything that we should be looking forward to with regards to your content that you'll be putting out for Ramadan?
Yes, inshallah. I've got some things coming out in Ramadan, inshallah. Not as many as I would have liked, but alhamdulillah, everything, as I mentioned, even if it's just 2 things, inshallah, you'll see something.
Inshallah. Sheikh, Ustadh, thank you so much for your time today. Again, your storytelling is something that people look up to, something that I look up to. Your ability to relate to people, your cultural references, I think is your biggest asset. And alhamdulillah, you're using it to a very good degree, inshallah. I continue, I hope and I pray
Inshallah.
that your efforts continue to be rewarded and to be multiplied a million times. And inshallah, may your
Ameen.
path always be eased.
Ameen. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so
Ustad.
much. Assalamu
Wa alaikum
alaikum.
assalam.